Welcome to IndoctriNation, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein.
Hi, everyone. I am so pleased to be able to report that this podcast is being listened to in some really interesting places. So again, as always, be in touch with us. If you are in Hungary, Slovenia, Estonia, Norway, Australia, or the Netherlands, really curious to hear from you. Please get in touch. indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And so for today, we have Kendra Lee Bryan. She is a 2-time cult survivor and host of the popular Culture Shock show on YouTube. Kendra describes herself as an investigative humorist who casts a snarky spotlight on cults, crime, and crooked culture through a piercing lens of levity. Her humor, intelligence, and passion for cult education are driven by her own cultic experiences and make her an excellent host. Make sure you subscribe to her Culture Shock YouTube channel by clicking the link in the show notes of this episode. There you'll be able to watch the video version of our discussion today, as well as many other episodes with survivors from a wide variety of high control groups. Here is Kendra now. It is so good to be able to have Kendra Bryan with me today. This is a very, very powerful story. I know that it would be really good for you to be able to talk about you and your history. But I also know that when you're talking, you're speaking for the other people who have also been through similar things, if not identical things in so many ways, and helping them feel represented. So it's important for you and for lots and lots of people. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I appreciate the opportunity and the connection. And you do such great work in helping people in this way, in a much bigger way than I do, but I'm definitely glad to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I think it is really a lot to ask of someone to come on to talk about things that mean dredging up so much feeling. I also know that sometimes it can be part of the healing process to talk about it, to kind of make it where it feels more like a story that you're sharing. You can gain some kind of emotional distance, not total, but a little bit more each time you tell it. So I'm happy to be part of that process for you too. So if you don't mind just taking a few moments and introducing yourself so people have a sense of who you are now, and then we'll go back and hear more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Kendra Lee Bryan, and I actually live in Arkansas, which is not something that I'm super excited to share most of the time, just based on a lot of different things. But that's where I'm currently at. So if you hear that accent come through, let me just apologize in advance. Sometimes when I get excited about things or passionate about things, the twang comes out a little extra strong. So you might hear that. But yeah, so I grew up in a very conservative, very culty family, in a very different type of way than maybe like a standard cult. So it took me a long time to even talk about it and share my story publicly. In fact, I think right around a year ago, July of last year, is when I first published my first like social media post talking about it specifically and naming it as a cult. And then from there, it just caught some wind and became this whole big thing. And now that's what I do full time, is talking to other survivors of cults and exposing not just cults, but people in positions of power and controlling environments, undue influence, all of those types of things. So yeah, like you said, it's heavy to bring stuff up, but there is maybe some detachment there, not talking about my story the majority of the time and allowing other people to talk about theirs or covering other stories. So it's a different ball game to be here now And I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to deal with my own shit now.
Right. Well, right. I mean, I think what I try to do is I also try to make sure that when people are talking to me, they're not flooding themselves, and they're just, I can see physiologically that this is getting to be too much. So I try to temper it and help them pace
That's
themselves.
great.
That's from doing this for a couple decades. It took me a minute to learn how to do that, though.
It's a great
Yeah,
skill.
yeah. I'm sure it's still a work in progress, but it's interesting you mentioned about the twang. I was asked to speak at a National Association of Social Work conference in Little Rock, in Arkansas,
Oh,
and
have you already done that, or is it coming up?
yeah, so I did that. It was interesting. And if I'm asked to come back, I've never been to that area of the United States. So if I'm asked to come back, I will definitely be in touch
Yes,
with you.
please.
But yeah, I didn't know about you when I was there. This was already a number of months ago. Uh, but the talk that I gave was about how fear makes us at times say yes to things that we know we needed to say no to, like staying in a church or staying in a relationship, and how you get over that if you feel like you were taken advantage of in the fact that you were accommodating, that you were kind, that you said yes, and all the very valid reasons that people stay, because that's often the unfortunate question that's asked when people share their abuse experiences, that the focus goes on them. Well, why did you stay? And that's I think the wrong focus and the wrong question, because it's blaming the victim. But I really wanted to highlight kind of the top 40, 50 reasons. There's so many really valid reasons that people stay. And then the part about how people get past it, there were 3 women who came up to me after, who had all been raised in churches that were their community. It was their whole community. They all came up to me separately. And they each told me that I had left something out. They liked me. They all said something lovely. Thank you so much for your presentation. But they all said that I left out forgiveness as the means to heal, which was so interesting. And I said, so tell me about that. And they said, well, when we went to the church to talk about having been abused by someone within the church, like our pastor, choir director, whoever else, we were told to forgive, and that it really helped us heal. And finally, after hearing the third story, I said to this unfortunate third person who was getting an
Uh-oh.
accumulation of my responses from the first 2 people, sorry, whoever you are. And I said, what happened to the pastor? I mean, I keep hearing stories about how you went there and you needed to forgive. And she said, I'm sorry, what? Like, she didn't understand the question. And I said, no, what happened to the pastor? Oh, honey, I don't know. So the passivity of it was palpable. Like, it was so interesting. And I think forgiveness should happen based on if you feel like it's good for you, not, or based on merit. Like if a person really apologizes or changes, or the church fires the person or whatever else, then you can do what you need to do. It was very interesting to see that response. And that's actually why I didn't include that word in my talk, because it's often given as something that the victim needs to do with
Right.
nothing happening to the perpetrator.
Absolutely. I love that you purposely didn't include it. And that's also a point that I get a lot of heat for when I've talked about, because I've openly spoken about the fact that you don't have to forgive. Forgiveness, for a victim to be required to forgive, is misplaced, in my opinion, because forgiveness is oftentimes about the perpetrator or the abuser and less about the victim. But it's kind of like a thin Band-Aid for the victim to just get over it or to move past it. And it makes it easier for the abuser because, oh, well, they've forgiven me, and it's easier for them to move on as a perpetrator, not as a victim. But what does forgiveness actually mean, or what does that actually look like? And is it necessary? And who is forgiveness for? I don't know. And it's also personal. There's not like a one size fits all when it comes to that. So it's very complicated, as are all of these types of things.
Right? Yeah, but you're right. It should be case by case, person by person, what's best for them. Not here is the formula that you need to follow. That makes it then easier for us because now you're not as angry or upset about what happened and we can move on. Right. So I feel like it's selfishly driven. So, okay. I know that there is a lot to your story, and I know we just have over an hour to, get into it, and there are days worth of information. So I would like to hear just a little bit about sort of the origin with your parents getting involved in this and how that all happened, and then you being born into it and what a day in the life was like for you.
Well, I'm happy to share all of that. The days that I haven't blocked out.
Right, right. Oh,
Anyway, no, it's a lot easier to talk about now, but now as a parent, I think looking back on it is the most difficult part because I could never treat my child the way my parents treated me and my siblings and still do treat us. And I have not forgiven that, since we're talking about forgiveness. I think there's certain things for me personally that I won't ever forgive my parents for, especially against children. And yeah, so that's the right decision for me. And I think forgiveness is also often associated with reconciliation. If there's forgiveness, then there has to be reconciliation. And I have no desire to reconcile with people who don't want to change their behavior, and to be re-traumatized. So again, that's just my personal story on that piece of it. But yeah, so I was actually born in Portland, Oregon, and then all my family's from Texas. They had moved up there. I believe I had been told that my dad was going to like a seminary school for a year or two. And so I was born in Portland, and then my family moved back to the South and moved to Arkansas. And so that's where I spent my entire childhood. And I was homeschooled my entire life. Like literally, I went to public school for kindergarten and then was homeschooled the rest. And I used homeschooled very loosely because there wasn't a lot of schooling taking place, to be honest. I'm sure you've heard that from other people who've been homeschooled in these types of like high control families. But I was given some sort of education probably through like 8th grade, I would say. And so in the redneck world, deep woods of Arkansas, my entire childhood wasn't that strict. It started out just kind of like normal-ish, I would say, like just, we would have friends over, we would have Christmases, and that was probably till like the last Christmas I remember celebrating, or like birthday, was probably like age 5 or 6. And around that time, I remember my dad coming home with a goat in the back of his truck.
oh,
And
okay.
that's when everything changed.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So red flag number 1 was a goat in the back of a truck. No. But what that ended up being was my family then became like interested in having a farm. And then that transpired into us moving out into the middle of the woods and like getting all of these goats. So I had lived like on a dairy goat farm for a big piece of my childhood, but that's also kind of when my family went off the rails with religion and just like anti-government, anti-everything. So we lived without electricity and without running water for years. We built from scratch, like literally cut down trees, like skinned the trees, like peeled the bark off the trees and built this rough cut tin roofed barn. And that's where we all lived. And there's 7 of us kids. So at the time, I think there was 6 kids. And so we lived just out in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of 20 acres, off the beaten path, homeschooled. Like I said, no electricity, no running water, like completely off grid. But this wasn't like my family didn't approach it as a like hippie or like living off the land, healthy granola type of family. It was specifically because they didn't want the world and the ungodly world to influence the children. Like that's the whole purpose. So yeah, so we didn't receive healthcare or dental, anything like that. I didn't do any of that until I was an adult when I ran away. So when I was 18. So so it was like a lot of catching up after I left. But I tell people that we had like some IBLP involved because we did like a lot of the material, the belief systems, the homeschool material, a lot of that came from that type of world. But also being in Arkansas, we were just right down the road from the Duggars. And at the time, the Duggars were huge. Granted, most of my childhood, we never had television or electricity to watch television, but we still knew who the Duggars were. And so my parents, especially my mom, like really idolized that and behaved the same way as Michelle Duggar, as the keep sweet, pray and obey, like the the voice, the voice. And then it just
the baby voice.
Yes. And I think she still does it to this day. I don't have a relationship with her, and I haven't for 15 years. But it's still very much that way. But then it just kind of got even like crazier with like the beliefs. And of course, my family was like the huge Y2K preppers for a while. All my siblings, like myself and my older brother, were born in the hospital. And then my dad delivered the rest of the children at home. Like my mom gave birth at home for the rest of them because they didn't want to be involved again with like healthcare, hospitals. And looking back, and things have started to click, they used a lot of corporal punishment with us. They were big believers in corporal punishment. And so I think keeping healthcare out of things was a way that they could hide the abuse. But yeah, so no one really knew we existed for a long time.
Wow. Right. My goodness. I remember years ago when I was asked to help. There was the raid on the FLDS compound, the Warren Jeffs compound. I wasn't involved in the raid, and that's not something I think I would do. There are a lot of pros and cons, but still, I was working with the social workers after, who were working with a lot of the women and children who were taken off the compound. What I remember hearing from one of the teen girls who was already a sister wife was that she didn't know that there were police. She didn't know there were social workers. She didn't know there were people outside who were going to care about what was happening to her. And that was the biggest revelation for her.
God, it's such a good point. And there's things like being raised like that I don't even think about sometimes. Like that's not normal to not know about that. But I did figure that out the hard way along the way after I left. But number one, government police were always vilified. And, we were always taught, like, if anyone thinks something's going on, then they're going to separate you and all your siblings, and you're going to be put in foster care, and it's going to be horrible. You're going to be raped and molested and abused. Like, it's so vilified. And like the government is against this Christianity or their specific set of beliefs. But I had no idea about social workers or that I could report a crime. I didn't even know that's what the police were for, as far as like if some abuse was happening at home. I didn't know. And even when, like, several years after I left, I believe my son was already born by this time, I ended up in a really abusive relationship, and he physically, like, tried to kill me. Like, told me he was trying to kill me, said he had dreams about killing me. And I faked being dead until he left, or he passed out rather, from being drunk. And I snuck out and left. Even then, I didn't go to the police and report it because I did not know, and this is years after, I did not know that I could do that. It wasn't that I didn't want to. I did not know.
That is a fascinating thing. And yes, this is not to say that the police are perfect by any stretch.
Absolutely not.
No.
Another conversation for another day.
Right? Oh my goodness. But still, in some situations, they can protect you. What I think also, and then we can go back to your childhood, and I want to hear more about this barn.
Or not, either way.
Or not. Okay. But yeah, I would like to a little bit.
Yes.
Being able to define the words, to know that what happened to you was abuse. I mean, that's a whole other challenge here. being able to have the language for it, what abuse is, and also that once you know how it's defined and that it can come in many forms, and now people know more about spiritual abuse, but that it can be emotional, physical, sexual. It can also be in the form of neglect, which happened too, it sounds like. Um, but that there are these things that I remember talking to people too and helping them define that is what happened to them. And they still didn't want to go to the police because now they knew what it was called, but then they still felt deserving of it. And so there still wasn't a clear perpetrator in the story. So there are these, like these hurdles to get over just to be able to advocate for yourself.
Yeah. Because a lot of the principles, no matter like across many religions or controlling families like this, is that everything is rooted in victim blaming. So if something bad happens to you, it's your fault, or you did something to make this happen, or, God's punishing you for XYZ. And so you internalize everything. Like you think everything is your fault. And just because you leave doesn't mean that that thought process and that belief goes away. Even on a logical level, you may know it's not your fault that someone tried to kill me, but like, on a deeper psychological level, emotional level, maybe it's, well, okay, did I put myself in this situation? Did I made the choice to be with this person. It's my decisions that got me to this point. So yeah, you basically gaslight yourself and talk yourself out of the abuse that actually happened as being someone else's fault.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's so debilitating. And it goes back to this question, well, why did I stay? Well, good for a lot of these reasons. Okay, so here you are in a barn, homeschooled, no running water, no electricity, and corporal punishment. So this is your life. And it sounds pretty bleak, actually. So were you able to have any moments that you remember that were joyful, that were fun, where you were laughing? I know that's not really necessarily important in these groups.
Yeah. Man, like you're hitting it nail on the head. I've talked about that with my brother. So there is one brother who I have a great relationship with. The rest of my siblings don't have anything to do with me. A lot of them are still really wrapped up in that. The one brother I do talk to, thankfully, he left and he's 11 years younger than me. So it's interesting because we have two very different experiences growing up in the same house with this. My parents eventually separated, and so it's a very interesting dynamic because we were both extremely traumatized, specifically by my mom, but in very different ways because of our age gap and just where my parents were, at that time. So yeah, the corporal punishment played a huge part in that, and then joy is vilified. It's not acceptable most of the time. The only joy that you should have is in the Lord. And if you're having joy outside of the Lord, then you're probably putting things before God, or you're, false idols. That was, a term that was always brought up. And my mom had this thing where anytime I would experience joy, things that brought me joy, she would find a way to intentionally get rid of that. For example, I had a dog, this cute little dog named Jake. And this is when we lived out in the middle of nowhere. This was my dog, Jake. And we had a lot of animals, but this was my dog, this specific one. And he would go with me all the time. I would love to wander out in the woods, and he loved to chase armadillos and, hunt armadillos. I don't know. It's the most Arkansas thing I could probably ever say. And I kind of regret saying that out loud now. But here we are. So anyway.
And we lived through it. Yes, go ahead. It's fine.
Be the name of my next book. No, so there I was, like, going through the woods and with this dog, Jake. And so we just would it was great because the time outside of the house was probably the most peace that I could find just by myself out in the woods. So I really learned to love isolation in that way. And that dog was important to me because he was like my little companion. He was the only thing I could really say was mine. Nothing else was. I didn't even have a bedroom that had a door or anything like that. And with that many siblings, inevitably share everything. So I woke up one day and this dog is gone. And without warning, my mom said that she had given it to some other family in the church. And I think I would have been maybe like 9 or 10 at this time. So without warning, this dog is gone. Then I find out like they bobbed its tail, they changed his name, like they did all this stuff. And as an adult, that might not seem that big of a deal, but as a kid, that was such a big part of the little identity that I did have at the time because I had virtually none. um, it was ripped away because he brought me happiness. And then it happened again several years later. I wanted to be a horse girl so bad. So bad. I wanted to be a horse girl. And my dad was like, okay, well, if you save up the money, you buy it yourself, you take care of it yourself, you can have a horse. So I did. My parents owned a restaurant at the time. They didn't pay me, but I worked there and could save the tips. So I saved up all my tips, bought a purebred Arabian mare, had her bred, had a baby. So I had these 2 horses. I built the fence. It was the shittiest fence. The horse got out all the time. I was like 13. How good of a fence could a 13-year-old build? But, love this horse. I would spend probably like 8 to 10 hours a day with this horse. It's like obsessed with this thing. And then my mom informs me that I have to sell it. Why do I have to sell it is unclear, except it brought me happiness. So it's just anything that would take attention off of essentially my mom, but it's often masked as God or, womanly things back then. It was unacceptable. So I'm still very salty about that.
As well as would be expected. I mean, these can become extensions of yourself, They are very close friendships. They become family. It's like giving away your brother because you're attached. And also, it's your therapy and it's your solace and it's something you look forward to every day. And so, right, just giving away your joy because you weren't supposed to have it, because you were distracted by it, maybe in their eyes. That is just tragic. And it makes it hard also to have attachments.
Now, listen, what you're not going to do is, no, I'm just kidding. You're not going to diagnose me, Rachel. No, I'm just kidding.
Not at all. Never, never. But
I'm
right.
just playing. But no, you're absolutely right. How do you learn healthy attachments when that's kind of your benchmark, or that's like your example of what attachment is? You don't know any better.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. The closer you get to something and the happier you are with it, the higher the chance is that it's going to be gone. I mean, the message is really destructive.
And how does that translate as an adult to like self-sabotaging in relationships? Because once you find happiness or love or you're enjoying something, then it's like you kind of have this thing in the back of your mind, like, okay, well, when's it going to end? When's it going to be taken away? Because inevitably, that's what your body knows is this isn't going to last forever. And this is ultimately the result. So yeah, that definitely played a big part in my adult life as well, especially with relationships.
I'm sure that also to be expected. I'm so sorry that happened. And when you were saying also that you and your brother were reminiscing about, well, a lot of things, which is a really important thing to be able to do. And I'm really glad you have that. When you were talking about really being terrorized by your mom, that can happen. I know people, when they think about childhood abuse, they'll often picture the father. And that's not to say that he wasn't involved, but so can you talk a little bit about that? What your mom did that left you feeling even more afraid of her?
Yeah, it is interesting because I think there's always what I describe, and this isn't an official term because I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not anywhere near qualified to say anything about anyone. But it is interesting because it seems like there's usually an aggressive abuser or someone who's more, forward with the abuse. And then there's a passive abuser or someone who's more complicit in the abuse. And that was the case with my family. Is my mom was very much loud, screaming, throwing shit, like hitting, slapping, and then delegating a lot of that to my dad, who would have to carry it out or whatever. But I think being complicit is just as damaging and harmful as not, because why didn't you just say no? Like, why didn't you protect your kids? Why would you not want to protect your kids? Why would you like support someone and follow through with it if you didn't want to do it I don't know. It's very confusing. And honestly, like, my years in therapy has been less about my mom and more about this complicated relationship in my head I have with my dad because of that. It's like, I expect that from my mom. Okay, you're a shitty person. You're an abuser. But it's very confusing when the other abuser is less textbook abusive. But when it comes to my mother, yeah, it's very, very layered in the types of abuse with that woman. I will say the brother that I mentioned is a trans man. So he was born female presenting and has transitioned in the past, maybe 5 years or so. And so we were both girls growing up and were the targets of my mom's, like the majority of my mom's abuse. She targeted the girls. And we have 5 brothers. And so they obviously still receive some or a lot of the corporal punishment, the physical punishment. But my mom, for some reason, would target both of us in a very malicious and different type of way, which now my brothers, that's why a lot of them are still close with her, is because they're like, she's not abusive. She never did that. Like, they're very defensive and protective of her because they, I think, are brainwashed and manipulated and all of these things, but also they didn't receive the type of abuse that the girls did. But very manipulative, very narcissistic, and that word gets thrown around a lot now. I feel like everybody's labeling everyone as a narcissist, but I've done so much research on it and just like, okay, am I being dramatic? Am I like misrepresenting who she is or how she's displayed this behavior? But she's very textbook, like, malignant narcissist, and refuses to go get any tests done. Like, some of her siblings, some of the family has been diagnosed with various mental illnesses. Like, the history's there, but she's just in denial about it. But things like, I have the brother right under me stuttered really bad growing up. He had a really bad stutter, some neurological issues, I think. And he would also have seizures. And I have vivid memories of like him getting upset, and his stutter would always be a little bit more prominent when he was upset, obviously. And she would just sit there and mock him. Like, he's a little kid stuttering.
Wow.
And instead of going to speech therapy, anything, no, she sits there and just mocks him while he's upset and like trying to communicate and already struggling to communicate. So it was stuff like that, just like always tearing. Every time I would cry, like, I have another memory where I remember I got my ass beat, with a belt or fucking dowel rod or who knows what it was. But I remember crying, and I was in her room. Like, she left me in her room after she was done. And there was a window in my parents' bedroom. And I remember like crying. My eyes were all puffy. And I was just like so upset. And I thought that they had all left because they were like, she did that. And then the family was going somewhere and I had to stay there by myself. So I'm like sobbing because of just everything. And also not having healthcare. I didn't know at the time, undiagnosed autism and ADHD. So I already had these things that were going on that were undiagnosed. And I just remember like not being so frustrated and like not understanding what the hell is going on. And then looking at that window, and I see her peeking around the window, looking at me, laughing at me through the window, like fucking psychopath. So it's just like my childhood, when you asked if there were moments of joy, not really. And I asked my brother that not that long ago. I was like, am I making this up? Like, have I blocked this out? Am I only focusing on the negative? Because I genuinely, I can't think of like a memory with my mom specifically where I was genuinely happy. It was, if I was happy, it was a performance because that's what she expected, was for me to act like I was happy. But genuinely, like, was Kendra happy? I can't say that I was. I don't at least have recollection of that. My happiness was in isolation, and that was obviously taken. So,
Right. It seemed like it threatened her or threatened the system when kids were happy. So, to go back to some of the things that you said, first of all, about your dad, when someone plays a role where they are more of the passive participant, it is a confusing picture because you want them to, this is not to insult your dad, but you want them to be strong enough to protect you, to stand up for you, to say no, to push back. And when they don't, you have to wonder what that's about. And if they're afraid as well, if they're afraid of your mom, if he was afraid of your mom. When you were saying too that there are a lot of people who don't come to the rescue of their kids, a lot of the time, the reason that they don't, because after having talked to a lot of them, they will say, I thought I was rescuing my kid. I thought this was for them, to protect them, to teach them the lessons that they were supposed to learn, or that if I did this, I knew that then the other abusive parent would, lay off them for a while. And so I think there's confusion for that participant also about what is right and what is wrong in that moment and what you really need and what you don't. And so, not that that's to give your dad a pass at all, but sometimes, yeah, people do think, oh, I am trying to benefit my child in this way, even though it doesn't feel that way at all.
yeah, because I'm like, how does neglecting your children, not just one child, but like, you fuck it up for 7 kids? Like, none of my siblings even talk to my dad anymore, really, me and my brother, but it's such a weird relationship because it's not really even like a parent-child relationship. It's like there's this grown-ass adult who's so disinterested in our lives, but will like pop in when they want to share something about their own life. Like, it's just very selfish. And again, as a parent, I don't, how would neglecting my child, physically hurting my child, any of these things, isolating them, keeping them from healthcare, just like things that don't make any fucking sense. Like, how is that protecting? So I think very black and white. I think some of that's the autism, but it's like, it's hard for me sometimes to wrap my mind around how parents do that, especially being a parent now, because in no world could I sleep at night doing to my son what was ever done to any of us. It's just like, it's so wild to me. So yeah, it is just very complicated. And maybe I'll get to a point someday where I'm okay with that. After I've been out of that, this will be the 18th year since I ran away. So I've been out now as long as I was with my family, and I'm still not okay with that treatment, and I haven't accepted it, I guess, fully. And I don't know if that day will ever come, but we'll see. Hopefully, maybe.
Right? Maybe. Yeah, it depends, if it is something that helps you to think of it that way. But I think to some of the things that you were saying, though, about your mom, and yes, the word narcissism is thrown around, and people who just might think that they're really good at something or think they're attractive are called narcissists, and that's not about that at all. But she does sound textbook, unfortunately. Sorry to say, but the fact also that she was so lacking in sensitivity for your pain, and it came off as cruel just to be mocking. The thing that happens when you have different needs or special needs, when you have a stutter, when you have any kind of physiological issue, if you have also, even with ADHD, that can be affected by stress, when you are giving someone a hard time when they're already having those symptoms, you're making sure that they have more symptoms most often. And so then you just keep mocking them, and then they have more symptoms, and you keep mocking them and they have more symptoms. And in those moments, kids often feel really trapped because there's no way out. that is the formula often that leads to things like suicidal ideation. So I could see that being something that got woven in because people want it. They need to know that there's a way out of this because there isn't a way out. And also, if the world is ungodly, quote unquote, where do you go? I'm also really happy to hear that your brother had a chance to become your brother after leaving the group, which would have never
Yes.
been afforded a chance to him to be able to become
no.
his true self. So I'm very happy to hear
Yeah.
that.
It's a completely different person. He is now, obviously physically, but so much more than that. Like just how I've seen him like truly embody happiness and joy and fulfillment and expression. Like it's just it's night and day. Like it's
So
really
nice.
beautiful.
So nice. Good. Yeah. So the idea of feeling trapped, I mean, here also just that, you're living somewhere so far away. How do you get help? How do you get back to the world? Do you want to be in the world? You're being abused and then mocked, and there isn't no safe parent to go to. There isn't an adult to protect you. And yeah, a lot of kids will contemplate not being here anymore.
Well, I was definitely one of those kids. I remember a very specific time. The first time I tried to unalive myself, I was 8. And it's because my mom specifically told me if I had it so bad, then why don't I just end it? And so I was like, oh, well, she must be right. So again, we didn't have running water, but we would like there was like a natural spring a little like mile from our house. So we would haul water up in buckets from that. And this is so gross, share bath water. like whenever we would take baths, we would just essentially like bring the water in, heat it up on the wood cook stove, dump it in the bathtub and bathe. So to me, that was the best way that I could think to get out of the situation. So I tried to like drown myself at 8 years old in this bathtub. And it was kind of like a movie and not in a good way. But like I remember being under the water and thinking it was kind of like time just kind of stopped. And everything was just like quiet. But my thought was, because I'm second oldest, I'm the oldest daughter, there's all these younger siblings. And the reason I came up out of that water is because I was like, and this is at 8. And I remember thinking, like having that thought, like, if she's not doing it to me, she's going to take it out on them. And and I don't mean that in a heroic way, but it was just like, I felt guilt if I was not here because then they would have to receive like more of the shit from her.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's okay, even if it does sound heroic, it is. I mean, it's your nature. It's not like you're saying, look at me, but that is your nature to really be very practical and also protective. And so that's what I'm getting from that story. And then unfortunately, it means being self-sacrificial.
And didn't that set the precedent for like, it really sets precedent for the rest of your life. It's just like, if you're not in a caregiving, like self-sacrificial role, then what is my purpose here? And that's something that I've struggled with a lot, is like, I've made so much of my life about trying to help people, whether it's, just being a mom or being a good partner or being there for my brother, or like until this year, I had, the past decade has been in corporate healthcare. And so it's just kind of like finding ways to be available to other people. And sometimes that's a way of self-redemption, maybe. And then sometimes that's a way of avoiding self-reflection. So it's like, I don't feel like it's heroic in that way, because sometimes it feels like it's been a dodgy thing for me to do, or maybe to just fill in the gaps of whatever emptiness I've had in that area in my life. And it's taken me a long time to even figure that out about myself. And that's an area that I'm even struggling with now, because my son's 2 years, he's a junior this year. He's 2 years away from graduating. And I'm like, fuck, like, I'm sorry, when he's grown, what do I do? Like, what is my purpose now? It's a very weird thought to have, of like, okay, if I'm not taking care of somebody, then what do I do?
Right. Right.
Wait,
Yeah.
take care of myself? No.
No.
That's silly.
That's ridiculous. When people are faced with suddenly not having the task that they are really good at, that has been their life focus, that has also been part of their nature and part of how they were raised, it is very hard to think about what you're going to do next and if it's going to feel important, if it's going to feel right, if it's going to feel like enough. And so I think you and other people who are suddenly dealing with kids growing up and having their own lives, where I am actually in my life right now, you turn to other things. You turn to the things that give you joy, that help you feel really good when you wake up in the morning, but also you can turn to yourself. And that's a hard one because there is this idea that that's selfish when you're raised in a lot of these environments. But that there is a nice way of, I think, looking inward. It doesn't mean you're putting yourself above other people. You're just saying, I matter too. It's an important place to get to. But I did want to ask about just growing up and also a little bit about how your mom was harsher with the girls and what that's about. I hear that actually quite often. What do you think that was about for your mom?
What I have accepted is that it definitely wasn't about us. It rarely is with people like that. It's rarely about the victim. It's almost never about the victim. It's something in her life that she felt probably a gap or a need that was never fulfilled. Or who knows, like I don't know that much about my parents' childhood or anything, and I probably never will. And that's a really weird thing to come to terms with too, is like, what happened to you? Like, part of me doesn't give a shit, if I'm being honest. Like, part of me is like, it shouldn't fucking matter because y'all did a shit ton of shit to me, and I have actively, consciously chosen to do better. Why could you not have done that? But part of me is curious because I'm like, maybe it would help me digest this easier if I did know, if there was a logical reason, if there's something that I could put my finger on and be like, okay, so this happened to my mom, and that's that was kind of the turning point to the monster she is now. That would give me something. But I don't have that. And I've accepted that I never will. But I do fully believe like something obviously was going on with her long before I came along or any of us did. And then I also think the deeply patriarchal religion, not to mention our society as a whole, but the religious aspect of it, even though my mom at home was the aggressive abuser, it was never portrayed that way in public and in church settings and in group settings. It was very much the man is the head of the household. He calls the shots, he makes the rules, and the woman submits. So I think a lot of the shit that she took out on us girls was a reflection of her having to be subservient and be abused in that way, and the spiritual abuse and like all of the complications with that. And then I think she was bitter. I think having children made her very bitter because I think she saw the girls in our youth and just being whatever the accumulation of her own trauma, it just, it came back on us. We just happened to be on the receiving end of that. But yeah, I think having 7 kids too, another thing that I've noticed looking back is that being pregnant, she received a lot of attention because that was another thing, like just like the 19 kids and counting the Duggars, having so many kids was kind of this symbol of godliness. And so every time she would get pregnant, which was like she had kids every 2 years, like clockwork, then it was like, oh, I don't want to say her name, but like, oh, Miss So-and-so's having another baby, And so it was just like almost like a status of having in the community was like the more kids you had, the better. And having a quiver full, all this shit. And so being pregnant, she received a lot of positive attention for herself in that way. And then when she wasn't pregnant, the kids, the actual born children, received the attention, or at least it was taken off of her. And so, and I've heard my dad say, and this is really fucked up, but I've heard my dad say, well, she was just easier to deal with when she was pregnant. That's fucked up in its own right. We won't even get into that. So yeah. So that's just, I don't know. And so I think losing her youth and just body, I don't know. I think it was just so complicated, and she just took it out on us, unfortunately, instead of going to therapy.
Instead,
Just go to therapy, guys.
yes, please.
It's not a fix-all, but it can fix a lot.
It can. I like that you're able to conceptualize this really accurately, that it didn't have to do with you, even though it can feel so personal, and especially when it's directed at you in a physical way or an emotional way. It's like you're dealing with someone's issues and you just happen to get sort of swept up into their vortex when you're with them. And then now it sounds like you were able to kind of spin out away from that vortex and have your own life, which is quite an amazing thing. So let's talk about that, about you getting to be 18 and leaving. So is that something you were planning, and how did you do it?
Oh, yeah. I'm planning that. I mean, I knew pretty early on, especially like once I tried to drown myself, it was kind of like, I don't know. I always had this thing in my gut where I didn't know what was out there, and I was told how horrible it was. But very early on, I realized no matter how bad it is out there, I'm kind of willing to chance it. let me see if I can make it out there. So I knew like pretty quickly that I wanted out, but I also, like, my parents were so controlling that I knew I couldn't just take off without some sort of plan or something. So I deliberately waited until I turned 18 because I knew they couldn't bring me back. I'd be technically an adult, a legal adult. Anything before 18, then I knew they could legally bring me back. And I only knew that because other kids in the group had tried to leave before 18 and were brought back. So I knew from that I had to kind of strategize in that way, which, being controlling parents, which this is another subject, it just creates very creative children when it comes to figuring out plans or strategizing, which can lead to dishonest children and no trust. And like, that's its whole thing. But it did make me very creative, figuring out how to do that. And so, yeah, so I waited till it was maybe a couple months after I turned 18. And I had just got my driver's license. My parents didn't let me get my driver's license until I was 18, and just got it. I didn't have a car, but I had been talking for a couple weeks with this guy who had also been involved in this same fucking church, in the same cult. And he had gotten out, or so I thought, and he lived in another state. And so we'd been talking for a couple weeks on my little hidden Nokia phone. And I faked being sick on a Sunday and wrote a note, left it on the table, classic runaway story. And I threw some shit in a literal like black hefty garbage bag, and he picked me up and I left. And we got married 2 weeks later, which was a choice for sure. um, but you know, 6 months later, I was pregnant with my son, and he's just the coolest person in the universe. And so that worked out in that way. But it was, you know, it created a sense of desperation in me when I left, because I didn't know what was out there. I didn't have a job. I didn't have credit. I didn't even know what credit was. I found out after the fact. Another thing my mother did was take out loans in my name while I was a minor and really screw my credit. And she did this to several of my siblings. And so that was not fun to figure out once I left. But yeah, so there's just so much I didn't know, and I was terrified, but I was more terrified of going back, or having to go back, having no other options but to go back. And so I married him 2 weeks later. Unfortunately, his family was still very involved. And so it was just like, I ended up right back in it, but I just had a wedding ring. I was legally bound to a person for a while.
And so then what was the trajectory on that? What happened?
Yeah. So, like I said, 6 months into being married is when I became pregnant with my son. And then when he was, I think I filed for divorce when my son was close to a year and a half old, maybe. And that's because my ex-husband told me he was cheating on me. He was working on the road, told me he was cheating on me. It was just a lot of stuff, it was shit. It was shit. And so I applied for nursing school and got in miraculously, which is crazy, except the fact that, I had a fake transcript, homeschool transcript. So anyway, I ended up getting into nursing school. So I started nursing school and went through a divorce and was like working 3 part-time jobs with this 1.5-year-old baby and like no family in another state, like the most chaotic, stressful time in my life. So now I look back and I'm like, okay, well, I did that shit, so I can get through anything at this point.
Right.
But, leaving that relationship was difficult, not just because it's a divorce, but like I was in an apartment at the time with my son, and I would get notes like taped to my front door from his family, from people in the church telling me all the ways in which I was going to hell because I was divorcing someone who committed adultery. Like, make that make sense. But yeah, but again, it's just the victim blaming mentality. Like, I remember his brother telling me, you need to tell your wife to get back in bed where she belongs. Like, that's going to be seared in my brain forever, and my son's dad told me, this one's seared into my brain too. He said, all you're good for is cooking, cleaning, and sex. And that's really sums up the woman's position in that type of environment, in that church, and that belief system. So yeah. And I remember weighing the options of like, do I leave this relationship? Do I, as my son says now, do I thug it out? Or what do I do? And again, it was like that gut feeling of, I thought, okay, I have a son. I know that he's going to become just like these men if I stay in this environment. And that's like, I just knew, like, if I don't get out of here, that's what my son will be. And I was like, I really can't live with that. I'm not okay with that. Yeah. So for several years, it really, really sucked hard, but ultimately the best decision, because I can see the difference in who my child is versus who he would have been in that environment. Now he's just like this compassionate, loving, accepting a human being. And that's the most beautiful thing any person can be, in my opinion. And so I've fucked up a lot. He's had to deal with a lot of my mess ups over time, but I think the best decision I've ever made is getting divorced.
Right. Right. Okay. So going to the idea that you were getting notes on the door. I mean, it's so kind of typical of how much girls and women are just hounded and how they just can't do it right. They can't get it right no matter what they do. It's still that they're under the scrutiny and open for criticism. And it just doesn't matter what the man does and what the man does
Literally.
to them. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is unbelievable. And the fact, right, that you could also see that, which is a really good thing, which says something about a growing sense of self-confidence. Like, there's something really off here. There's something unfair here. There's something I'm enduring that should be the focus, but instead I'm somehow the cause of the problem. That also is so confusing when you're raised to be introspective in that way and wonder what you did to cause something. You can, another situation of why you might stay in something for longer. And I'm really glad that you were able to leave. And I'm sure that your experiences have been woven into how you raise your son. What I think is really great about you, even just saying, well, that you mess things up, when he was growing up, is that you say that you acknowledge it, and that you can apologize for things when that feels appropriate. And that's a whole other realm that you introduced him to. So it doesn't always matter if a parent gets it perfectly or not. It's if they can say in a moment where they realize that this had not a good impact on their child, let me learn from this and let me acknowledge it and apologize if that's what I need to do.
That's a really good point, and I appreciate you saying that for sure. And it builds trust. Like that's definitely one thing I've noticed with him too. And I see it in a lot of parents, not obviously not just me, but I feel like a lot of millennial parents now are taking that approach of like, it's okay to apologize to your kids. It's okay to also explain to your kids why you have rules for things or boundaries for things. And my son that's one thing I messed up in the beginning of raising him is like, I'd be like, okay, no, we're not going to do that. Well, why not? I'm the parent. I said so. And he'd be like, well, that's not actually a reason. Can you give me like a real reason? And then that made me start thinking like, okay, so how can I explain this better? Or it made me kind of examine, why did I say no? Am I saying no for a good reason? Or what is kind of the basis of it? So yeah, it's made me have a lot of introspection, but I think exactly what you said, just being able to apologize or acknowledge when you mess up, or like even saying, I'm just, mom's having a bad day right now. I'm having a lot of anxiety, and not shutting that down, because I definitely used to be, if I was crying and he's just so especially when he was younger, just so sensitive to that. And he'd be like, Mommy, what's wrong? And I would just be like, nothing's wrong. I'm fine. I don't do that anymore. I'm not going to tell him all my shit because he's still a kid, but I'll be like, you know what? My anxiety is really bad today, or I'm stressed about work today. Thank you for checking on me. Like just acknowledging that is not just good for me, but that also teaches him, to be able to express that in his own relationships and communicate, because we really need another generation of women and men who can communicate their feelings instead of bottling everything up.
No, it sounds like you've done a great job. And also because he's tied in with you, doesn't feel responsible to need to hold you together, take care of you, but cares and wants to make sure you're all right, which is a lovely thing. It's also interesting when you start to feel like when you're a parent, you are sort of channeling this other parent. Like things can come out and certain words can be used, or a tone can be used. And it's really good to catch that, because if that can happen without you even realizing. I don't really yell at my kids. I haven't, except they run into the street and the car's coming. Like they're,
Sure.
right? Okay, yeah, that'll raise my voice more. But like, I figure like they can hear, and I don't need to yell. So, I remember one time when my three kids were young. The oldest one was very opinionated, and he was saying something very strongly to his siblings, and the siblings were getting upset. And I just said, and we were at the dinner table. I said, just go, which is what my mom used to do to my brother and sister. Just go. Like they knew that meant go to your room or whatever, like leave the table. It wasn't for discussion. There was no learning. There was no understanding. Just you have to exit. And I remember saying to my oldest, just go. And he got up and then he looked at me and he said, wait, I'm sorry, go where? I actually don't know. And I don't know why I just said that.
Valid question.
Right? Like, okay, but what?
Like, I live here. Like,
I'm not sure. I'm 14. What am I doing exactly? And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't, wow, where did that? I'm like looking inside me, like, where did that come from? So I go, no, just sit down. We'll figure this out in a different way. He's like, good, because I was really confused.
A little shit.
Right? Oh my God. But it's about catching it. And it's about saying, I want to do differently. I want to do better. Right.
Yeah.
And that's when your child can see that, when a spouse can see that, when anyone in your life can see that, when you see that in yourself, it's very powerful.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah. And having self-control, which you were not raised around, just people having self-control.
Yeah. I thought about that the other day. Again, weird that you say that, but I was just thinking about that the other day too, is like the self-control to when like I'm just like enraged about something or just emotionally overwhelmed or overstimulated, like the ability to pull that back in and not just act on it. Especially when my mom was the example, and she, we used to joke as kids about the time she threw a cantaloupe at my dad's head, and it busted on the wall. Like, it's not funny, but like that's kind of the example that was said, is to lash out in that way. And then now it's like I can feel all of that in my body, but then finding healthy ways to let that out, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in that moment, especially when children are involved.
Right. Right. Yeah. Wow. So I know we're kind of getting towards the end of our time chatting, and there's so much more that we could talk about. And I hope that you'll come back and we can continue the conversation. But before we finish up, I wanted to know if there was anything else that you wanted to make sure to say, or any kind of takeaway messages from people listening, because a lot of people listening are people who have been in these situations, some who still are, and write to me and say, I listened to this podcast kind of to get a boost of confidence or reassurance that I'm not alone, or that life can get better after you leave. I'm not yet convinced. I need to hear a few more to really know it. But just getting kind of a shot in the arm, a little more and more and more. So just for whoever is listening, what would you like them to know?
I wish I had some sage wisdom or some catchy thing I could say for me personally, and I think is maybe helpful when leaving a situation like this or coming to terms with leaving, is having the ability to trust yourself, because so much of that is taken away. Just intuition or listening to your gut feeling, because it's rarely wrong. So if you feel like something's off or that you're being mistreated, chances are you probably are. You're probably right about that. And you don't have to have any other reason to leave a relationship or a situation. If it feels off, that's reason enough. You don't have to justify it any other way. You know you best. No one who says they know you or tells you what life is like outside of them or outside of the group, they don't know you more than you know you. They have conditioned you to think otherwise, but you're absolutely allowed to ask questions if it's safe to do so. You're allowed to have thoughts and opinions and your own personality. Like, anything otherwise is a red flag, in my opinion. It doesn't mean it's easy to leave or to make that decision, but if you can, find it in yourself to start trusting your gut more, or to just even through little things to kind of build that rapport with yourself again, I think that's huge. That can be massive to actually leaving and getting somewhere safe and healthy, because you're going to mess up a lot. Life is going to suck anyway outside of that, but at least you have the autonomy to make those decisions when you're out. At least you can decide if you're going to fuck up, and it's not decided for you. So yeah, I think just finding and getting the agency with yourself and your intuition back is just massive. It's the thing for me personally.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was pretty damn sage, by the way. Yeah. You
Oh,
said you
thank you.
didn't have anything, but you did. Uh, and I think also, I think back, and the reason I was asking about joy is because I can tell you have a good sense of humor, and it's hard, when you're growing up and you don't have a place for that, to laugh and to smile, and that seems to be part of your nature. So you really had to rein that in for so many years. So tell people where they can find the work that you're doing, your podcast, etc.
Yeah, so I'm primarily on YouTube these days. I really enjoy making long form content in that way. I started off doing kind of guest interviews, but I've transitioned outside of that. I enjoy doing guest interviews, but that's not just what I do. I cover a lot of cults, crime, and like unhealthy cultures of all kinds. And so I do a lot of solo episodes using puns, humor, wordplay, a lot of profanity, obviously. But it is very cathartic to I don't talk shit about shitty people, but it's really not talking shit if it's true. So if it's based in fact.
Mhm.
So yeah, but they can find anyone can find me on YouTube for the video versions. You can look up Culture Shock or Kendra Lee Bryan, and that's my name on all the platforms, TikTok, Instagram at the Kendra B, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all of those. So yeah, that's where you guys can find me. And I appreciate that so much.
Of course. Thank you so much, Kendra, for being with us today, and hope to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
One more thing before you go. It is so powerful to hear Kendra's story. Oh my goodness. Wow. I think it is amazing when you hear about so much cruelty, when you hear about so much abuse, when you hear about neglect, emotional, physical, when you hear about so much that happens at the hands of a parent or is let to happen. And then when you become a parent yourself, which I hear quite often, it's really hard to look at the abuse that you endured and wonder, how could that have happened? How could, even more importantly, how could they have let that happen? But there are also parents who I talk to who will talk about having been in some kind of trance, or because they were made to feel that it was for your benefit that they treat you this way. It's for your benefit that they keep you away from the world. And as Kendra was, she was living off the grid. That so many of these groups don't want the children to be influenced by the ungodly world. But then, what does that mean? Does that mean the life of abuse is a godly life? And so that leads us right into this idea that Kendra talked about, this idea of joy being vilified. Now, for someone like her who loves to use her sense of humor, I am sure this was really contrary to every fiber of her being, because someone who can be edgy, snarky, humorous when they get older often have some part of them inside that was hoping to be able to get that out when they were younger too. It gets refined over time and you have more freedom to use it over time, but it's often there that you see the humor in things, you see and you find the funny or just the ironic, and it helps you survive, actually. So the fact that joy is vilified, it happens in so many of these groups, happens in so many of these relationships that are just horrible relationships where you're not supposed to laugh. So many of my clients catch themselves when they're laughing, and they quickly stop themselves when they're smiling, when they're kind of swept away in a moment, and then suddenly they slam themselves back down to earth and say, no, I can't let myself get, quote unquote, carried away, because that's when I'll be vulnerable, or that's when I will do something that's unholy. That's when I'm going to do something that's not going to be able to be under my control or someone else's control. I might say or do things that are considered ungodly. But when you look at the Bible, there is a lot about joy. There is a lot, actually, that Jesus talks about joy. There is a lot about, in the First Testament, the Hebrew Bible, where they talk about being able to dance and sing, where there is joy at the birth of a child, where there's joy at the union of two people. And that joy also is something that you're supposed to, according to biblical teachings, receive as a connection to God. That the closer you are to God, the more joyful you are. Well, that is not at all how it is taught in so many of these groups that say they are Bible-based. So you wonder why they took the joy out of it. And in part because there was this sense, I think, the leadership wanted people to suffer like Jesus suffered. And so if Jesus suffered, then you're supposed to suffer too. I think also, if I look at it in a very cynical way, but I'm not off base with some of the groups that I deal with, the leader wants to be able to just keep you miserable because then they have power over you. And if they are sociopathic, psychopathic in their way, they will enjoy your misery. They'll think that that's the way to keep you pure, okay, but also, and good, I suppose, too. But also then you need him or her. You need the group because you're so fragmented. You're so down. You're so not feeling happy about anything. And why would you leave? You need the group to kind of hold you together, to keep you from really feeling like you're at your end. Because you've been told that you're not supposed to be able to dance and sing. You're not supposed to be able to laugh. You're not supposed to be able to enjoy joy. In fact, there is a biblical name, Yitzchak, Isaac, which comes from the word sochek, which means to laugh. It's part of biblical tradition. And so sometimes people will say to me, how do I know if I'm involved in something that's not healthy for me? Or how do I know that my loved one might be getting involved in something that's not healthy for them? And one of the questions that I will have people ask themselves or notice in their loved one is, were you someone who laughed and smiled before? Or were they someone who laughed and smiled before? And are they still doing it now? Are you still doing it now? Or has life become very, very serious? All about suffering, all about needing to prove how much you can suffer to show how holy you are. And if you really want to notice what that's about, look at the leadership or look at the person who you or your loved one is involved with. This could happen in relationships too. Do they benefit from the misery they cultivate? Do they benefit because the person then gets dependent on them? Because they're just constantly emotionally bleeding and they need to lean on someone then. So notice the system and see if it's built upon suffering, because that's no way to live. That's just slowly dying, and for no reason. Thank you to Kendra and all that she does to make people aware. Take good care, everyone. Talk to you next week. Thank you very much for listening. Please support IndoctriNation on Patreon at patreon.com/indoctrination. Be sure to give us a follow on our social media. Find us on Facebook and Instagram using @IndoctriNation Podcast. And for Twitter, find us at @_indoctrination. We love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And for more updates on the show, visit our website at www.podpage.com/indoctrination.